The lover is deeply sensual, sensually aware and sensitive to the physical world in all its splendour, say Moore and Gillette in their book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. His sensitivity leads him to feel compassionately and empathically united with all around him. He not only sees the world in a grain of sand, but feels it to be so. He wants to touch and be touched physically and emotionally. He feels the joy of life as well as the painfulness of being alive, both for himself and for others. All of us, say the authors, when we stop doing and just let ourselves be and feel without the pressure to perform, are accessing the lover. In Tolkien's Aragorn, we see the manifestation of the lover archetype in its most complete form. That Tolkien himself bore some of this quality is without doubt. Yet no human, no flesh and blood creature can ever take this mantle fully upon themselves, nor should they, Moore asserts. The archetypes in their fullness are the gods, in one way of looking, like Christ, Krishna, or the beloved, as the Sufi mystics say. At best, we might aspire to their virtues. Next, in this sweet hierarchy of perfection, come the children of the gods and mortal folk, not dissimilar to Jesus, partaking of the divine essence, and so coming to earth, but of a much lesser order. Warriors, like Achilles, for instance, ripening with experience to eventually exemplify this crucial aspect of the mature archetype. Then there are the kings, those destined for high office in the truest and most sacred sense, and their magicians, the shamans, wizards, healers and the like, who watch over the soul and spirit of the land and its people. All have their shadows, of course, as the authors demonstrate, and all need and balance one another. In the absence of the king, the warrior becomes a mercenary. The magician becomes a sophist, one who is able to argue any position whilst believing in none. And the lover becomes an addict or an impotent lover, divorced from the zest and vitality of life. The lover needs the warrior to be able to act decisively or to pull back from addictive tendencies, and he needs the magician to help him detach from the debilitating enchantment of his emotions. Each of the four have their developmental patterns. The boy who is destined to be the lover, say the authors, is the Oedipal child, he who is warm and affectionate, passionate, with a sense of wonder and a deep appreciation for connectedness with his inner depths, with others, and with all things. The danger for this boy is that of all four boyhood types, the Oedipal child is more likely to be overly tied to the mother. To mature, To transition to a healthy expression of the lover, the child must cut these ties, lest they impede his life's journey. In Robert Bly's best-selling book, Iron John, a book about men, he talks of the psychological necessity of the boy to steal the key from under his mother's pillow. It's a reference to the Iron John fairy tale. Stealing the key, it turns out, is a pivotal act, for it sets him free to claim his full manhood, to leave the protective domain of the mother and begin his initiation into maturity. For Iron John, it turns out, will teach him all he needs to know to fully become a man. Aragorn, we may safely say, has made this transition admirably. Following the early death of his father, his mother Gilrain had taken him to Rivendell, where Elrond took him as a foster child, and he named him Estelle, meaning hope, for he was the heir of Isildur and destined to be king. But his true lineage was kept from him to keep him safe. For the wise then knew, Tolkien tells us, that the enemy was seeking to discover the heir of Isildur, if any remained upon earth. Under Elrond's guidance, Aragorn will become the man who will one day claim his rightful destiny as king, the new and future king, who, like Arthur of medieval romance, heralds the start of a whole new world, a whole new paradigm, in which the forces of evil will be, for the foreseeable future, vanquished and overcome. And when that time comes, Arwen Umdomniel, even star of her people, the Elven Lord's precious daughter, will be his queen. That he becomes a great warrior goes without saying, yet he is a gifted healer too, with qualities akin to the magician. Elrond taught him well, and he is elven wise as a result. Do you remember, in the first book of the trilogy, after Frodo is wounded at Weathertop, how Aragorn finds the exact herb that will soothe his wound and keep him alive until they can make it to Rivendell, to the greater healing capability of Elrond. And later, at the Houses of Healing, after the final battle for Minas Tirith in the third book, when the Lady Éowyn is carried wounded from the field after slaying the terrible Witch King, Aragorn is able to gently heal and bring her back from the cold shadow that has overtaken her. "Come back to me," he calls to the lady, drawing her back into the world. "Come back to me." And he bent and kissed her on the brow, softly saying, "Éowyn, awake, for your enemy has passed away." "The hands of the king are the hands of the healer," proclaimed the wise woman of Gondor then, as she looked on, "and so shall the rightful king be known." Yet it is through poetry, and as a lover, that Tolkien introduces him as a young man, in the often unexplored appendices of Lord of the Rings, to which we will now turn and quote at length. Now by chance it had come to pass that Aragorn had returned to Rivendell after a span of many months in the wild, keeping Sauron's orcs at bay. He was scarcely 20 years old at the time. Elrond was well pleased with him, seeing how he was turning out, and on this occasion told him the true story of his birth, of his royal lineage, and something of the challenges ahead. Next day, Tolkien writes, at the hour of sunset, Aragorn walked in the woods, singing to himself nothing less than part of the Lay of Luthien. His heart was high within him, and he sang, for he was full of hope, and the world was fair. And suddenly, even as he sang, he saw a maiden walking on a green sward among the white stems of the birches. And he halted, amazed, thinking that he had strayed into a dream, or else he had received the gift of the elf minstrels, who can make the things of which they sing appear before the eyes of those that listen. And behold, there Luthien walked before his eyes in Rivendell, clad in a mantle of silver and blue, fair as the twilight in elven home. Her dark hair strayed in a sudden wind, and her brows were bound with gems like stars. Now the tale of Beren and Luthien, first recounted in the Silmarillion, was dear to Tolkien's heart, as we have said elsewhere. And so it is telling indeed that we find its echo here on the lips of young Aragorn as he beholds his future queen. The story tells of the union between a mortal man and an elven princess who forsakes her immortality to be with her beloved, as Arwen, we know, will do in her turn. In this tale, Aragorn is so utterly enchanted that he mistakes the young Arwen for her legendary forebear, and he calls out to her, Tenuviel, Tenuviel, meaning nightingale, the name given to Luthien on account of her sweet singing voice. But the maiden knew him not, and she turned to him and smiled and said, Who are you, and why do you call me by that name? And he answered, Because I believed you to be indeed Luthien Tenuviel, of whom I was singing. But if you are not she, then you walk in her likeness. So many have said, she answered gravely, yet her name is not mine, though maybe my doom will be not unlike hers. But who are you? It seems strange to Aragorn that they had not met until now. But Arwen, it seems, has been for many years with her mother's kin in Lothlorien, and elven time and human time are of different orders. It seems as if these two are the same age, but this is an illusion. Aragorn is like a sapling, Elrond will later explain, whereas Arwen is like a birch of many summers. And yet it matters not to these two, and from that hour, Tolkien writes, Aragorn loved Arwen. But when Elrond came to know of Aragorn's enchantment, he counselled him against it. Arwen was a high elven princess, of too noble a birth for such as he, even though he was a king's heir. I see, said Aragorn, that I have turned my eyes to a treasure no less dear than the treasure of Thingol, that Beren once desired. Such is my fate. The years will bring what they will, Elrond said finally. We will speak no more of this until many have passed. The days darken, and much evil is to come. Then Aragorn took leave lovingly of Elrond, and the next day he said farewell to his mother, and to the house of Elrond, and to Arwen, and he went out into the wild. For 30 years he laboured in the cause against Sauron, and he became a friend of Gandalf the Wise, from whom he gained much wisdom, and with him he made many perilous journeys. But as the years wore on, he went more often alone. His ways were hard and long, and he became somewhat grim to look upon, unless he chanced to smile. And yet he seemed to men worthy of honour, as a king that is in exile, when he did not hide his true shape. For he went in many guises, and won renown under many names. Then at last, when he was 49 years old, he went to rest a while in Lothlorien, and it happened that Arwen was there, and they met again, and loved each other as before. And for a season they wandered together in the glades of Lothlorien, until the time of parting came once more. On the last night, Tolkien writes, they went to the fair hill, Ceren Amroth, in the midst of the land, and they walked unshod on the undying grass, with Elenor and Nifredel about their feet, and they plighted their troth, and were glad. And Arwen said, dark is the shadow, and yet my heart rejoices, for you, Estelle, shall be among the great whose valour will destroy it. But Aragorn answered, alas, I cannot foresee it, and how it may come to pass is hidden from me. Yet with your hope, I will hope. When Elrond heard of his daughter's decision, his heart broke, for he knew his beloved child would one day know the bitter sting of death and loss that mortal folk must bear. Then Aragorn went forth once more into the darkness, and to the long battle of the ring, and Arwen returned to Rivendell, though often, Tolkien tells us, she watched over him, her beloved, in thought, and in hope she made for him a great and kingly standard, such as only one might display who claimed the lordship of the Númenóreans and the inheritance of the Elendi. Thus the years drew on, of which more is told elsewhere. How the means unforeseen was revealed, whereby Sauron might be overthrown, and how hope beyond hope was fulfilled. And it came to pass that in the hour of defeat, Aragorn came up from the sea and unfurled the standard of Arwen in the battle of the fields of Pelennor. And in that day he was first hailed as king. And at last, when all was done, he entered into the inheritance of his fathers, and received the crown of Gondor and the sceptre of Arnor. And at midsummer, in the year of the fall of Sauron, he took the hand of Arwen Umdomniel, and they were wedded in the city of the kings. For 60 years thereafter, they lived together in love and harmony, until at last the time came for them to part. Then Aragorn lay himself down to rest, for his days were spent, and Arwen steeled herself to face the future without him. "I would rather share one lifetime with you," she had told him at the start, "than face all the ages of this world alone." And she had held to her promise, but not until the moment of her beloved's last breath did she fully know the bitter sting of death. A great beauty was revealed in Aragorn then, Tolkien writes, so that all who after came there looked on him in wonder. For they saw that the grace of his youth, and the valour of his manhood, and the wisdom and majesty of his age were blended together. And long there he lay, an image of the splendour of the kings of men, in glory undimmed, before the breaking of the world. There is so much hope in Tolkien's Aragorn. In him, king, warrior, magician, and lover are truly united. Our world today is in dire need of such men, caught as it seems in the grip of dangerously adolescent boys, as we said at the start, would-be or could-be wise magicians, overshadowed by greed, manipulating the weak with covert forms of control, potential warriors of legendary stature, loyal to the greater good, descended into apathy or brutality. Politicians, leaders, kings if you like, great men, fallen prey to corruption, tyranny and hubris, or weakened by evil counsel. And lovers, oh how we need them, not sick with addiction, nor impotent dreamers, but those who seize the day, as it were, keen humanitarians with a deep sense of wonder, and a love and understanding of the connectedness of all, and the capacity to stand for and to defend all that is good, true, and beautiful. A day may come, Aragorn cried out to his men on the brink of battle, when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day, an hour of wolves and shattered shields, when the age of men comes crashing down. But it is not this day. This day we fight.